5 o'clock. Stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome back, everyone, in person. It's nice to see everyone in person. Two new board members, Bruce and Angie, welcome, and good luck, guys and gals. Thanks for being here. Okay, first thing is our open forum. Is there anyone that is wishing to address the board? Seeing none, I won't announce it 3 times. So, number 4, looking for approval of today's agenda. Is there a second? And a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose the same sign. Okay, motion carries. Consent items. Again, you've read those, so I'm looking for one motion to approve all the consent items. Yeah, is there a second? Okay, Bruce, all right. Any discussion on the consent items? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose the same sign. Okay, motion carries. Okay, number 6, reports. Dr. Funk.
I'm going to go a little more in depth during the COVID update. Just want to give you a real quick rundown on numbers for where we are second semester here. So in person, we have 2,682 students in the district right now. Distance learning, we have 669. You can see the breakdown by elementary, middle, and high school. The 669 is down about 100 from where we started the year with distance learning. So we have more students coming back, and I think the teachers are excited about that because they want to be with those kids in person. So I've got that, and then the other piece is, since we do have a number of students who are doing online learning, we're thinking that online learning is going to be probably part of what we do into the future. So we are exploring options of becoming certified as an online learning school through the Department of Education. 2 different options we're looking at is, do we want to go kind of full-fledged like we're doing this year, or do we want to do it in a manner in which we are, how do I want to say it, offering some opportunities maybe through online that we don't necessarily offer to all the students in the high school. And if we get certified as an online platform, there's the possibility of doing it in the summer as well. So if we had students who want to take some advanced classes in the summer that they could maybe fit into their schedule during the year, that's something we could do. Mary Jo and John Double are taking the lead on that, and I can have them certainly come and give you a presentation on some of the things that are out there at a future date, but want to let the board know that that's something we're looking at.
I hate to interrupt your report, but I think that's a great idea, and I can recall a time when there were opportunities for especially students from smaller schools to take advantage of courses that we can offer because we're a larger school, but there may be some courses out there, like some school may have somebody that teaches Russian, And so if we have that platform in place, I think we can take advantage of that, and other schools can take advantage of what we have.
And depending on where this would go, what kind of students could enroll? Would they just be Minnesota? Could they be other places?
Just Minnesota. It would be something certified by the Minnesota Department of Education.
How many current schools are there right now offering that approximately?
Within the Big 9, Red Wing and Winona and Faribault, but they have an online provider they're working with. So that is something different than what they're doing is contracting with a provider and then maybe having a teacher sit in the room while somebody else teaches it. Owatonna, Austin are looking at more of a model. We would do this with our staff. One of the things we talked about, this is about 10 months ago when COVID was really starting. We talked about doing a Big 9 online. Problem is funding. How do you, if we have a kid who, say we want to send somebody to Owatonna to do Russian, who gets credit for the kid and how does that work out? So, but those are some, but, you know, a lot of people, I had a meeting with the ALEA leadership last week and they said, well, in one of the communications to the teachers, I talked about there's a lot of things we are learning within this whole year that we can move forward into the future with. And this is something, this is definitely one of them that we can take advantage of. And there's some other things out there as well. But so anyhow, but I wanted to make you aware that this is something we're starting to explore since we've been doing some sort of online for a number of months now. The other thing that's really unique about us, Rochester was asking the question a few weeks ago, because they have not been in person their secondary level all year long. So they were asking the question of the Big 9, how are you guys doing it? And I think we are the only district in the Big 9 that has a dedicated distance learning staff that is just committed to either K-12. And so and at the high school, of course, we have other teachers who are teaching it as part of their day as well. But so we've taken a little bit different approach here. And that's really that part of my report for tonight, unless there's any other questions. Angie? There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
No, I was just wondering, do you think that most schools will do this, or would this set us apart from schools in the future?
I think districts are going to start to do it. How they do it will be the difference.
Is there been any research done to how many FTEs, or is this more of an overload situation or dedicated teaching staff?
Yeah, that's part of the whole discussion on how we want to approach it. So no idea yet as far as that.
Yeah, good, great option. Anything else? Okay. Let's go school board member reports, and let's start with Neil.
It's been quiet month on the school farms. I have nothing to report.
Okay. Jill?
I attended the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drugs Committee. We had another discussion about truancy and just reaching and staying connected with kids in the county. And the sentiment was given by some individuals there about that it would be nice to have our middle school students come back full-time as well. I know we've been tossing that around here as a board as well, but I know that's a ways out. But and then Southwest student group Sway was having a really fun Hunt for Health, I think it was called, on January 15th, and so some fun things going on in the district and county.
Thank you, Jill. Bruce?
Is it on? Yeah, not too much is going on. I missed my first toy meeting, so I'll get up to speed with that with Kim tonight after the meeting.
Angie?
Do you want me to do the report for business education, Dennis? Sure, okay, sounds good. I was in the business education committee. Dennis was there also, and most of the time was spent explaining things to me, which I greatly appreciated. I got a lot of history and background on the purpose of the group. We talked a little bit for new topics about restarting the social media breakfast. We talked a little bit about doing some training on the Future Forward website. And we discussed, there was a survey that Alita sent out to local businesses asking what they might need. And we haven't seen those answers, but we'd like to see those and get some ideas. Dennis had mentioned that there is funding coming in for daycare issues, although I think he said that participation was down because a lot of people aren't back to work yet. We talked a little bit about unemployment. In the area, the Minnesota unemployment rate is 3.9%, and Albert Lee's a little bit better at 3.6%. The Workforce Development Center has gotten a grant to to assist with justice-involved individuals. We talked about that a bit. And I think finally, the committee has sent out postcards in the past to new businesses and businesses with anniversaries. But we'll be sending out another round to businesses that just opened up, just to say, we appreciate you, we're happy you're open again. And I'll be helping Val Qualley with that, probably this week, I'm guessing. So, can you think of anything, Dennis? Did I miss?
The only other thing, I think the unemployment numbers were a little questionable because they're so low, but I think as we talked it through, a lot of it is because people aren't going back to the work, so they're basically off the unemployment rolls right now. Keeping a close eye on that, because down the road that could end up coming back up pretty high fairly quickly.
Angie, Dennis, anything new?
The community or the business education, and then I was also at the governmental affairs meeting. Good information there. I think one of the big concerns is getting everybody vaccinated and getting us moving forward. I know Dan Dorman talked a little bit about there's going to be concerns moving forward with education to make sure that we're getting the dollars that we need to move forward. And also talking, it's great we're getting the kids back in the school, but it's probably going to be really important to get those teachers vaccinated. And I know Kathy's been working hard already getting things in place, so the sooner that happens, I think it'll be a much more comfortable scenario for everybody. But those were the only two I had this week.
Good. Thank you.
Just kudos for all the efforts going into the feeding the kids, the vaccinations, and all the tracking. It's good to see across the community of the district, and then also to see how we're kind of leading the way on some things. So we got to just keep up that good work.
Thanks. Kim?
Well, I was negligent in getting Bruce's name to the committee for TOY, and actually they changed their schedule, and they are meeting Mondays and Thursdays when we typically met on Tuesdays. So we'll talk after, but I didn't make the meeting as well. But there's another meeting this Thursday, and they meet at 3:30. So sometimes that's difficult for me to attend, depending on my work schedule. So it'll be nice to have Bruce available to attend for one of us. But I do know that applications have started. You can submissions for nominations, for Teacher of the Year. So go to the website and you can pull those off, and we're looking forward to that.
Good. Thank you, Kim. No committee to report on for myself. Neil?
Mike, and I'm not sure that this topic's going to come up, but a few meetings ago, and there's been some rumblings out there relative to COVID that vaccines are going to be made available to staff in educational institutions, and testing was, I think I heard someplace it mentioned that testing would be made available.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on it in 7-1 here coming up here.
Good.
Okay, Aaron, anything to report?
Yeah, so just once again, welcome to Angie and Bruce as new board members. And then all I know is that students are really happy to be back and able to learn in person at the high school. From what I've been able to see, everything's been going very well. So just really huge thank you to everyone who's been working so hard to make that a reality and a possibility. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Michelle, you're up.
Hi, my name's Michelle Klunder, and I teach at Lakeview. I'm a first grade teacher. We started our COVID testing on site 2 weeks ago, and it went really smooth. Tomorrow will be our second time testing. And then we were doing professional development our first week back, and at the elementary level, we worked on science and suicide prevention and trauma training. And we started our winter fast and phonics benchmarking today in the elementary level. That is all I have.
Thank you very much. Okay, number 7, safe and healthy schools. We have a COVID update by Dr. Funk.
Okay. All right, so as I presented to the board a number of months ago, we really are looking at 3 factors when we are determining what learning model we're in. We look at our internal positivity rate, or positive numbers. We have currently 17 positive cases within the school district. We look at the county positivity rate. This is the first time since we've been tracking this that it's gone out of the fives. It's now at 6%. Freeborn County has been trending in the wrong direction. We look at cases per 10,000 people. At the beginning of the school year, they talked about 50 being the number that you should try to stay below. We are currently at 54, and we are going much higher than that. We are really trending the wrong direction as a county. Next slide. So, you know, the state is dropping. I think we were, I don't know, below 2,000 cases today. We are going the wrong direction in Freeborn County. I'm anticipating our number, which is just over 50, to go over 100 on Thursday. We've had multiple days of 20, 30, 40 cases. Today's numbers were good. We had 6. So that's a positive sign. I mentioned the positivity rate. The other thing that is really concerning to the school district is sports. We started sports last week, and we started school last week. And first 2 days of school, I think we quarantined 45 students for 2 weeks who'd been exposed to youth basketball or hockey. And so, you know, we got the mask on now, which I don't know how much that's helping, to be honest with you, with kids sweating through them. But here's what I will say about sports, though. If the governor is saying we can compete in sports interscholastically, then I can't see how he can tell us to shut schools down when we're allowed to do that. So that's kind of the concerning news. Let's flip to the good news. We have done a very effective job of screening everybody on a daily basis. They fill out the questionnaires. We go through the thermal scanners. Our nurses are very assertive, and we quarantine a lot of people to make sure that the district is safe. Neil, you mentioned testing. We now offer testing to all staff. We had over 200 people take it last Wednesday. We have testing available to all staff tomorrow, and that includes contracted staff as well, so bus drivers, cooks, so everybody can take it, and it's a pretty quick turnaround. I think do it on a Wednesday, they should have the results by Friday typically. So of the 187 positive cases, today actually was the first day we've seen an internal transmission. Until today, we did not have a case that we could trace from somewhere in a room to another person. So when we talk about being a safe environment, I think our schools are about as safe as they can be with the procedures we have in place. So the way ahead. We have now been told by MDE that they are going to start slowly distributing vaccines. So we've had 9 individuals who have, we've asked if they're interested in being vaccinated, and they will be, and they're going to go to Rochester over the next starting Thursday evening into the weekend. I think it's Willow Creek Middle School. They can go and they can get vaccinated. So that's the first. Our nurses will also start to be vaccinated this week through Freeborn County. So those are the first individuals who will be vaccinated. The nursing COVID team with Kathy has put a list of priorities together as far as who we think should be vaccinated first. The first group are teachers and paraprofessionals who work very closely with students on an individual basis. And from that, we are going to be expanding the list. Kathy also is in the process of developing a survey to send out to staff to see if they are interested in doing the vaccine. So if they say, yes, we are interested, then we will prioritize that list. And the MDE has really given us guidance on how to develop the priorities for that. So that's a positive thing. As I've heard the board say for a number of meetings now, minutes at the secondary level remain a concern. So I'm going to have Mark Grossklaus and Chris Dibble. They've been tasked with working with their leadership teams in their building to figure out something we can do on Fridays. And I'm working with Steve Anderson, because we've really shut down the building on Fridays, but if we can get them out of there at their normal time of 1:15, you know, I think that should give us enough time to do the fumigation in different parts of the building to keep it clean and over the weekend. So they will be coming to you at the study session in 2 weeks to share their ideas that them and their leadership teams are going to be developing, so what we can look at for Fridays. Some districts try to do a catch-up day. Some would do, since we have we have an A group and a B group, we might do this week, Group A meets on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Next week, Group B meets on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And so, but they've been tasked with taking a look at that, and so you'll hear that in a couple weeks. The other thing I can't emphasize enough is, I don't know why we're going in the wrong direction, what's going on in Oberle, but we need to work together as a community to really drive those numbers down. People are getting fatigued. They don't like wearing the mask. This is longer than people signed up for. They didn't sign up for it, but you know, as we're starting to get shots in people's arms, we're starting to move, you know, closer and closer to becoming, you know, back to school in a full-time format. But we need to really, because I will tell you, folks, we are, with those county numbers the way they are, the only reason I'm recommending, and you can go to the next slide, the only reason I'm recommending we stay in school is because we've been able to keep the spread from happening within the school system. And that's the only thing I can tell the Department of Health as we move forward here. So I just think we need to work together with our community partners to drive those numbers down.
Is that something where is mine on? Okay. Is that something where you make a recommendation that, or a plan that we're based on, you know, that we haven't had the transmission, that you can say that to public health and they'll say, okay, you can, or could they say, sorry?
Don't know,
Okay.
but that's my intent.
Sports,
sorry.
Oh,
No, Jill, go on.
sports has been a big concern of mine, especially knowing that it was a problem before we went totally distance learning. I was really concerned when I heard that sports were going to be allowed again, because, you know, sports are very important, but they're not as important as our academic in-class teaching of students. So has the conversation been had, or does it need to be had? Because I would be in favor of postponing our sport interaction for a bit, or limiting it in some way, perhaps just varsity, something. I just feel that if we're thinking of safety for our students, our community, our staff, numbers are climbing up, that to me, it doesn't make any sense. I think that we need to focus on the safety of our kids, so that they can stay in school as long as possible.
You bring up a great point. I think Paul Durbin has really taken this to heart as far as putting procedures in for those teams that we work with in the high school. I mentioned the community spread, or the spread of quarantining over 40 students here at the beginning of this. 2 of those teams were youth sports that the district has no control over. And so that is where we are. I feel better about the areas that we have some procedures in place for, but unless we can convince, I mean, technically, you know, we'd have to convince the arena to shut down. We technically could shut down our buildings to use sports, but that becomes a wider community issue as well. But that is, so that's the reality that we're looking at.
I
Yeah.
wonder if it's a possibility for collaboration then with the city for the safety of our community, to meet, for somebody to have that discussion with them, and perhaps they can also postpone sports on their side since there's already been a problem.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the direction of the board, that's something we could take a look at.
Dennis, go ahead, I don't see
Yeah,
it.
and just to the youth sports piece, that's probably the biggest challenge. You have these teams going into the gyms, into the hockey arena, and a lot of times it's not the kids that are causing the problem, it's parents showing up that have it or not understanding not to be there. And we're seeing 2 and 3 kids now that have been in programs that there was a COVID case, they have to go out of school for 2 weeks. Now they're in something else, they're out for 2 weeks again, they haven't gotten it. A concern at the schools is the coaches and the teams come in, and they have those kids by themselves. How are they being held accountable if they're the coach and the kids are the only ones in there? Are they following the procedures, making sure those masks stay on? Because all it's going to take is one, and we need to be diligent on that. And then the parents too. I think that's creating some of the issues because they're bringing it in, and we did the social distancing and those pieces, but it becomes a huge community issue. So at what point do you say we're going to have to back off on traveling teams right now? The other piece that I worry about with that is, do they have the right insurance? Because if something happens and these booster teams don't have qualifying insurance and something happens, there's a lawsuit or something comes back, who's going to be held liable? And I'm just thinking, you hate to have to start digging down that deep and looking at it, but for the sake of the district and for the community, just being aware of it.
Neil?
I agree with everything Jill said and Mike's alluded to. In terms of sports being high risk, unfortunately, sports, athletic activities are activities that are conference-wide, statewide. They're not specific to our school. And so if we don't have those activities available for our students, they're going to go someplace else, and they will take part in those activities in venues where we have no control. And I have no data to support this, but I would not be surprised if the result, the negative impact of that arrangement on us would be worse than it is for us to provide those activities and to do so in a venue that at least we have some control over.
Angie?
I have a concern that's kind of the flip side of what people have mentioned, and I emailed you a little bit yesterday, but there's a lot of concern from parents about athletes wearing masks while they're doing aerobic activities. And I'm just curious, is there any way, maybe I can answer this, is there any way that they can still be in compliance and be able to breathe and
Yeah, for those kids who have documented medical, they don't have to wear a mask, okay? But for the kids who don't have that documentation, it's a state high school league rule, and you know, the student would face disqualification, or the team would face forfeiture if they didn't have the mask on.
Kim?
I wanted to address Neil's comments, and I totally see what you're saying, but I also am inclined to kind of favor this idea that it's our responsibility on a larger scale, that academics is what we do here. We prepare students that way first, in my opinion. We're a student athlete. And so if we give in to this notion that we're going to lose people in a short term, I'm afraid we're going to lose people because we didn't make the safe choice. But I'm not there, because I think right now the the transmissions happening in our district are so low that we're doing what we need to do. So I'm not quite there, but I understand what you're saying. I do know, Angie, that and I don't know if it was the school board association that had it, or I watched a tutorial from a doctor who talked about the mask and how it doesn't It's not unsafe for students unless they have those kind of, like asthma specifically is what he called out. But one of the things he said was, and Mike alluded to it, when they're sweating, so especially hockey, they're telling them to bring multiple masks because as they get moist, then they can, or they get, because it's cold and there's ice or whatever, they can switch them out. But there was the presentation, and I think it was through the high school league, about the mask piece and that it's not as unsafe as people think it is, or might have been said.
It's concerning to see videos of students passing out while they're playing and things like that.
I'm just going off of what the doctor.
Dave?
Yep, Dennis.
Dennis?
Is there, I think there's development of face shields that they're working on the hockey side of it, so that they're not having the mask and the shield and then their mouth guards and along with that. But, is there room for some of the kids in some of the other sports where a face shield, is there a legal face shield they can have? Or are they saying specifically it has to be a face mask?
Neil.
I'm involved in wrestling, of course, and at first appearance, one would think that that would be probably the worst example of an activity where contact is pretty hard to regulate. And masks, I could have reported, I suppose, that I have attended wrestling rules clinics lately, and they're all over the place, changes weekly. The league initially, because of, on the basis of safety for the participants, would not allow wrestlers to wear a mask while wrestling because it could get tangled up and blah, blah. And then somebody complained about that. It was an infringement on somebody's rights. And so now they've had to come up with rules changes to accommodate those that do want to wear masks, who cannot deny someone from wearing a mask while wrestling. But if the thing gets all tangled up, it's rather insane, some of the results that have been visited upon us by the imposition of this pandemic upon us.
I agree with Neil that if we don't offer it, they're gonna go someplace else. I've got 2 grandkids that are wrestlers. They've been going to Iowa, Tulsa, Oklahoma. They've been traveling all over because Minnesota doesn't offer it.
Yep. Dennis.
Do we have any other statistics of the other schools where they're doing the sports, where it's affecting their learning in school versus distance? Or I'm guessing we're farther ahead than a lot of them being the in-person learning versus distance.
Just a couple factors, all right? So we've had in-person. I think the last data I shared with you, I think, and Brad might allude to this. Brad Lundell's here from Schools for Equity and Education, and he might allude to this in his legislative report, but one of the initiatives in the legislature right now is to hold districts harmless because district right down 20 miles down the road has lost hundreds of students this year. District hour west of us has lost hundreds of students this year. Rochester's lost 800 students this year.
What do you mean lost?
They've like gone to homeschool or gone somewhere else. And Rochester's a great example. They haven't opened up at their secondary level. Lourdes High School is bursting at the seams because they're in person. So opportunities, sports, education, people are walking and going someplace else, whether it's a sport or whether it's instruction. And we've lost, I think 40 was our number, so I think we're really holding very well compared to a lot of the districts in the area.
Well, we've talked a number of times about this, and I'm truly in support of getting back to this educational opportunity with the kids in person. I think we've been almost a year where they've been in a disarray, is a nice way to put it, and hopefully getting the best they can, but I hate to think of our society as going to mediocre or the best they can anymore. But as far as getting them back, it looks like our schools right now are one of the safest places to be. because we are screening, and I don't fault other districts for not screening, but it seems like if we can catch it quick and keep it at home and have a community that supports that, I think the Fridays is a good idea. I think it's a good start to seeing the kids back. As far as activities, I mean, truly what Jill said and Kim said, academics are what we're here for, but also as an activity style person, I know what gets and keeps them there, kind of like in a football game. Sometimes they'll say offense will put them in the stands and defense will win games. And we want to be able to try to have a nice mix of both of those to keep the kids here. And anything you can do, I know it's not easy because there's definitely two sides of the coin. And but I think anything we can do for our kids, and I think we need to look at the majority of the kids when we make our decisions. So thanks for bringing that up.
And I know Paul is working with Bob Furlan with the arena on masking and keeping kids safe out there. And I can certainly have him talk to our boosters who run our youth programs about procedures moving forward here. The other thing I can tell you is we are not hosting any home games. I mean, if they're home games, they're internal in the district. We're not having any tournaments come in for our youth programs.
I do know that there is a hockey youth COVID coordinator. I've talked to the person. So I know they're watching too the best they can, and they've had concerns both, all the way around. They don't want to see their arena shut down because of them or because of the schools too. So hopefully that is a good step. Dennis.
One closing thing, I don't know why it caught me, but our mission to ensure individual academic, social, and emotional growth. And as long as we keep focusing on that and the education that our kids are getting, I find it hard to believe that we'll go wrong. We gotta make sure they're ready to leave Albert Lee, ready to roll, whatever they choose to do.
And part of that is social. And we want to keep that, as part of that's, when like you say, the whole person and the whole majority. Good point.
And another part of social is to accept our social responsibility to the greater community and not just to our own interests.
Yep. Angie.
Going back to the vaccines, do you know, will the state make that mandatory for staff and students, or will that be?
Great question. Two parts to it. First of all, it's an experimental vaccine. It has not been approved. I mean, it's been used for experimental use, and so they cannot compel somebody to take an experimental vaccine. So we are going to offer it to staff. And the other piece of it is I've had communications with Mayo about potential. I think we're going to get it locally from the pharmacies in Mayo before we're going to get it from MDH for our teachers.
That's another question that popped into my mind. To what extent, if any, can our local in-house clinic become involved in testing, vaccines, et cetera?
We do testing at the clinic, very slow. They have to send it to a lab someplace, and their lab is very slow as far as the COVID test. Not aware of where we're at with the vaccine with them locally yet. It would.
I just have one more question.
Yeah.
The 9 vaccines that we're able to do, how are those 9 selected? I know Kathy sent an email, but I mean, can you give the kind of an outline?
We looked at in a perfect world, you want, as a classroom teacher, you want to be 6 feet away from your students in 15 minutes. We have some special needs environments where that is totally impossible. So the people who work in those environments are at the top of the list. And then we're going from there. And it's teachers or paras. It's just don't have to have a license. It's, if you're in that type of environment.
Good, thanks. All right, great discussion. Thank you very much. Moving on to our effective and efficient operations, Brad Lindell for the Schools for Equity and Education update. Do you want him up here? Okay, there you go.
I've got some
Well, thanks for having me out tonight. I was just going to say, my wife knows where I am, but the dog's going to wonder where I am. So it's when I get home, there'll be a surprise dog. He's finally home. No, it's great to be out here tonight. I think plaudits to all of you for doing all the hard work that's been going on over the last like you've talked about the last year. I think it was March 16th the legislature closed down and went to distance legislation or hybrid legislation, and I think that it's been a really kind of interesting for all of us to figure out how this all works out. But again, it's been the issues I'm hearing here tonight are the issues that I've heard many places, and it's very, very complicated. And again, I always marvel. I was just telling someone today that the federal government's at like the 30,000-foot level, state government's like at the 15,000-foot level, and you folks are right on the ground. You're the people that have to make the decisions, make the tough decisions. You look up the mountain and you hope you're getting help, but oftentimes you're the people that really have to make those tough decisions, dealing with kids and adults in an environment that really has expectations. And so I really want to thank you for all that you're doing and anything that I can do to help with that. As Mike pointed out, the legislature it's hard to say it's in full swing. I think it's going to be this year. They're trying to go as with diminished expectations, put it that way. We're looking at a state budget for the next biennium that looks to be a little over $1 billion in the red, and that does not count inflation. So and I don't foresee a tax increase, so that means that there's going to be limited options to do the kinds of things we need to do for education. One of the things that they have talked about, or haven't talked about a whole lot yet, but going back to the payment shift issue and holding back some money and changing that, the state gets about $100 million for every percentage point that they hold back, because you're on cash and they're on accrual. And so the thing is that it's something that they probably don't want to do because of the political ramifications of it, but that's one place where there might be a possibility to at least get some money for education. The other big bill, though, and the bill that I would urge you all to watch right now, it's going to be heard tomorrow afternoon in the House Education Policy Committee, and that's House File 4. There's a variety of items in House File 4, and it's Representative Hassan from Minneapolis is the chief author. They're looking at two different things. One, what has happened to schools in terms of money. There's a Section 1 of that bill is, I wouldn't say a complete hold harmless, but it's a hold harmless for the general education revenue. There are some other places, as you guys know, with your community ed funds and those funds that have been depleted. Those are not included in this. This would just be the general education that would, allow districts to use the higher of what showed up in September, or what was what was the February forecast number before there was the exodus of students. There's about 10,000 students or 11,000 students statewide that have either gone homeschool or to another option. In some cases, they've moved to districts with charter schools, because oftentimes the charter schools have been doing every day. The private schools, of course, have done pretty much every day, and there's a lot of tension in some communities between the private schools and the publics on transportation, because the privates have been usually getting the transportation. By law, the publics are only required to, transport when they are actually in class. So that's another issue that's probably going to, crop up as the session rolls out. The other thing that is in that bill, there's some money for trauma-informed schools. There's a couple other provisions in there about special ed that are a little bit troublesome, dealing with the kids in the level 3 and level 4 programs, especially those non-English speaking kids, and trying to give them priority back to get into into the buildings as students come back into buildings. I think and then I think the other thing in that is you have to talk to your special ed directors. I do a lot of work with the special ed director community, but extending the transition program by a year from age 21 to 22, but then there gets to be staffing issues. As many people have figured out this year that it's really hard to find substitute teachers right now for a variety of reasons. And I think that having those, everything looks good on paper, but we live in real life. And I think that some of the challenges, that's always the challenge at the legislature, and I'm kind of working on a variety of issues for districts like Albert Lee to say, it's a little more complicated when you're actually talking about getting a person in front of a body. So those are the that's the big issue right now. And of course, that's going to be coming through the House. There's going to be, and I think this is going to be one of the frustrations we're going to see, of course, we're the only split legislature in the country now that the federal Congress will be nominally controlled at the Democratic level with the 50-50 tie in the U.S. Senate. Minnesota is the only body above a local government that has a Republican House or a Republican Senate and a Democratic House, which makes for the kinds of give and take that usually is like no giving and no taking, I guess, or is what we've seen over the last few years. Very, very difficult to get past the big issues to really get to the smaller issues. And I think that's one of the challenges for us as lobbyists is that trying to get the two sides together to really mesh into one unified vision is really been very, very difficult. And that's not to say one side's right or the other side's wrong or all those types of things. It's just we're kind of in this, when you're dealing with a crisis, it would be nice if everybody kind of recognized there is a crisis. We have to do some things. None of the decisions are going to be easy. Let's sit down, figure out how do we get through this. And I think that'll be the challenge for this legislative session as we move forward. As I said, they're going to try to get out of this issue without a state tax increase, which doesn't mean, again, that's going to roll down to, I know that you had a levy attempt last fall, and my guess is that you'll be seeing in the absence of much coming from the state, there'll probably be another round of attempts going for levies in this coming fall. And I think, again, that gets to be a challenge. I know just, again, go a little bit east of here, I think they had a very, they had a nail biter over there. I think it was a very close race where they lost their levy. But I think that other things is that we don't know what the economic landscape is going to be. I think that that's the real challenge. I think that everybody was thinking, at least in my mind, I was thinking when the pandemic hit, my mind immediately went to 2008 and 2009 and that recession. And then I was thinking housing prices are going to, we downsized because we thought we've got some equity now, let's not wait. But housing market has stayed strong. And I think everyone was kind of looking at the kind of magnitude of downturn that affected state government when we were looking at a $6 billion shortfall on a 10 years ago size state budget. Everyone was thinking the same thing was going to happen, but it didn't happen, or it hasn't happened yet to this point. Actually, for this year, for ending this fiscal year, they're still in surplus. Part of that is the fact that there are 11,000 less K-12 students showing up. So the state is holding back. I mean, that money goes to the state's bottom line. And one of the arguments, and the strongest arguments, and again, is that when you plan in February, as Mike said, there was, everybody thought, well, by June or July, things will be back to normal. Everybody's, and then, school's going to, maybe it'll be October, but, maybe we'll be wearing masks in September when we come to school. But, within a couple months, everything's going to go back to, the way that it was. And I think that right now we've seen with the extension of that, Again, all the students that went either homeschooled, the variety of reasons why some people kept their kids in distance programs, and we're hearing from, I talked to a school board member today that just has said, these parents whose kids have gone into distance learning say, can you create a distance option for the future going forward? I think, and so we're going to see a lot of kind of new issues that are going to emerge coming out of this, because some parents are going to find ways that, well, maybe this distance worked for my student better than the other system was. I don't know what, again, that creates another set of issues for the social emotional learning, the kinds of teamwork issues that we were talking about here earlier. When you're trying to build a whole child, can an online system completely and totally deliver that? But I think we're, again, that's the strongest case, I think, for getting that hold harmless in for the money that you were expecting to get last February when the budgets were set, is the state's current surplus, or end of this, or for this current fiscal year surplus. About 118 million of that is directly related to children that didn't show up in the traditional public school setting. And so I think that's, again, you're going to have, when you talk about, Rochester lost 800 kids, but some of those kids went to Lourdes, some of them may have open enrolled somewhere else, or some might have gone to a charter school. If they go to a charter school or open enroll somewhere else, they're still in the public system. I think the other thing that we've seen, though, and I don't know what your experience has been here, but there's also a bill up, and I know that when I heard Dan Dorman's name, I thought Dan's been working a lot over the years on the Broadband Coalition, and that bill is going to be up tomorrow in the House. It's a new committee, but they're dealing with broadband. It's House File 14, more grants for broadband. I think one of the things we've seen, and it'll be interesting to see as kids come back into school, how many kids have lost, which kids have lost more than others. And again, we see many families that don't have access to broadband, or don't have, in some cases, don't have broadband or a device. Some people have the device but not the broadband. Some people have both. And I think the thing is that as we move forward, trying to figure out how we're going to deal with those learning issues that have resulted as a pandemic. Flipping back to House File 4 for a minute, there are a couple of there's provision in there as well that would allow districts to use flexibly do the extended learning year or extended time revenue. That is another good thing. I think one of the things we're hearing more and more, and again, you're going to hear, this one is going to cause quite a bit of pushback, I think, in a lot of communities, is that how are you going to use your summer? Are you going to identify kids that, really need that summer to catch up? Because I never make assumptions anymore, but I'm hoping that, September of 2021, school's going to look like it did in February of 2020. But I think that's why I think one of the things everyone's going to have to figure out, how to use that summer, and is there a way to do some revenue or do some learning recapture, and the money there, the extended time revenue that folks can use then to recoup some of that. And I think that might be part of a bill going forward. Part of, as you look, the bills come together, you may see part of that money being recaptured. There may be caveats to try to get more kids, especially the kids that have fallen behind further, to get them back on with some of that money that would come from the hold harmless. But I think that's, again, one of the things that has yet to be determined. The Senate has been more, they actually just started hearing bills this week. The Senate has been really looking more. There's Senate File 2, which was Carla Nelson's bill. Carla was the chair of the education funding. She and Roger Chamberlain switched places. Carla's now the tax chair, and Senator Chamberlain from Lino Lakes area is the education funding chair and education policy chair in the Senate. They've been talking more about one of their big big push has been to get kids back in school, and how can we get kids back in school safely. A little bit of tension between Republican Senate and Democratic governor on the speed of that, and are we going fast enough, and are we, and again, as we've seen several times during the pandemic, there's been a lot of, hurry up, slow down kinds of things. And I think, again, I'm not going to defend one position or the other, but I know it's tough for you folks when they kind of lifted restrictions last fall, and then 2 weeks later, it's like, well, I guess we got to go back to doing it the old way. And I think, again, how to build on that, build a solid base and move forward, I think is going to be the real challenge. I think the vaccination is going to be obviously key in this as well. And teachers getting kind of getting encouraged to be moved to the head or the front of the line, or in the first couple of groups getting vaccinated. That's also going to be a positive thing. As far as from C's perspectives go, I think if you again look at our platform, looks a lot like platforms of other organizations, but I think we do talk about the COVID. We do talk about the, being able to, do that hold harmless for school districts, money that you were expecting to get that you would get. We are talking about money on the basic formula. I think one of the pushbacks we're going to get from folks this year is that, how did you use your federal money? And what were the strings on that federal money? And I think as we'll see another, the president-elect has put out a very, it's just a couple nickels and dimes, I guess he wants, like 1.9 trillion of them. But I guess the thing is, what is that going to contain for education? There's more money in there for education. What is that going to look like? There's also money in there for state and local governments, which is also, I think, that has been left out to this point. One thing I think, and I don't know if they're doing this, but I can remember back in 2009, they put a fair amount of money into special education. In that, I think it was the American Recovery and Restoration Act. I can't remember. It was ARRA. I can remember seeing all the road signs that said ARRA. But they'd put money in special ed there, and I think that would be a good thing for the feds to do if they were going to do that. Now, that's going to be above my pay grade in trying to convince those people to do that, but that might be a place, because then more money into special ed is basically money on the formula, because money that you're not taking from your general fund to pay for the cross-subsidy could be used then on the, you've freed up some money from your general fund. We're going to be pushing the equalization again, and I know that Senator Chamberlain is a strong proponent of the referendum equalization and of greater tax fairness. I think if you line up all the districts in the state on referendum market value per pupil, Albert Lee is in the lowest, I'd say lowest 10% of the districts in the state in terms of property wealth per pupil. And I think that makes it very, very important that the state participate in those levies, both the debt levy and the referendum levy, because I always use the example of running track. It was the only sport I was ever good at, because they said just follow the guy in front of you and try to pass him at the end. I didn't want to be in the lead. I wouldn't know where to go. But the thing is that some districts that have high property wealth, they run around the track, they get $3. Albert Lee runs around the track, they get $1. Well, you're running 3 times as fast, and if they run another lap, you got to run 3 more. So, I mean, the thing is that property tax equalization, kind of the heart of what we do. I think the thing that sets us apart from the other education organizations, not that they oppose us on this, but this has kind of been really where we've been at since the inception of the organization 40 years ago now, is to try to get that property tax fairness piece, because it is absolutely crucial. Again, looking at the special ed cross-subsidy and trying to keep that in line as well. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens, again, after kids come back from the pandemic. Is there going to be a greater need for special ed services? Are some kids that are going to be identified that wouldn't ordinarily be identified because their achievement may have fallen to a point where they're going to be 2 grade levels behind, they're going to be referred? So again, that's another thing to look at. The other thing, again, student mental health, and I think there's a lot of push. I think the House File 4 did have the trauma-informed schools piece. That's a grant program, though. It's not going to go out to everybody. We would think that increasing that revenue for safe schools and being able to use that for social workers, school psychologists, counselors, school nurses, the kinds of, again, wrapping around those services for the whole child. And to get the child not only where they need to be academically, but where they actually need to be as they move into their next step in life. And of course, the bottom line is no new mandates. And I hope this year is a year when they're not going to be, that they will understand that we're not going to give them a whole ton of money, so we really can't expect them to do a lot of new things if we're not giving them. And usually it gets to be a carrot and stick kind of thing. This year there's not a lot of carrots, so why would we use the stick? And I think that's, again, that's something that we're watching very, very closely. There will be mandates discussed. I think the other thing to watch for in the House and Representative Ruth Richardson is the chair of the Education Policy Committee. She was the chair of the House Select Committee on Racial Justice. One of her issues is disproportionality of suspension and disproportionality of referral for special ed. So just something to watch. It's something, again, there's going to be a discussion around that. I think that, again, I know that there's been districts throughout the state that have been, that's an issue some places and not others. But I know that something that, discussion that I hope that they use, I hope they don't take the universal and try to knock that down into the local. I hope that they take, some, solid evidence and try to craft that into things that are going to help, help raise all boats. So, with that, I guess the last thing we would like to do is, and we've talked a little bit about this, is we're looking for some long-term solutions on special ed and the cross-subsidy. Our legislative chair, Pat Devine's in the Waconia School District, and they're always teetering on the edge of statutory operating debt because of their special ed costs. We've actually even talked about looking at alternative sources of revenue, something like, if they aren't going to raise taxes, they have to start looking at other ways to other ways to raise revenue. We've even put sports betting in here, so I don't know. They've got sports betting in Iowa, so you guys can stay home. You won't have to run to Iowa to do your sports betting. So, but again, I'm glad to come out here. It's this is my first time out in. I think the last time I was out was sometime in early March when we were having regional meetings, and it's always good to get down to Albert Lee. Nice straight drive, and a little bit more snow than I thought it was going to be. But again, good to be out here. Glad to be amongst members. Glad to hear the discussions you're having, and really appreciate all the hard work you're doing on the part of the kids in Albert Lee. And again, thanks for your support in what we do and see, and we certainly couldn't do it without folks like you. Questions?
Kim.
So can you, Brad, when you talked about the 2% increase piece, the funding piece, so are you, when you talk about there's some people that are concerned about how people spent their CARES Act funding, and
Right.
So wouldn't that be, is there going to be some kind of, like, I just feel like that's very subjective, because, so are they going to match that up with results from the district, and, because everybody's going to look a little different that way?
Well, I think everyone is going to look different that way, because the federal dollars are all distributed, most of the federal dollars have been distributed on Title I. And Title I, the distribution of dollars is uneven then. It's not a dollar for dollar statewide. So you might have, when you talk about a district that has very little Title I money coming in, when you say, well, we're going to take are you going to take all the state money and all the federal money that came into the state and kind of, look at that? I'm not saying they're going to do that, but I agree with you, trying to match up federal money and to say, and they're also looking at fund balances as well. And then like, you know, I think there's a legislator that's very concerned that districts are, you know, they've been building up fund balances. And I'm like, well, this is why you build up a fund balance. This is why the state has state reserves, is for days like this. You can't, I mean, Lord help the district that doesn't have a fund balance when this hit. I think so that, again, I'm always leery when they start looking at fund balances and also start looking at something outside, some factor outside that's going to determine what they are going to do in terms of meeting the needs of all kids. But I think that there will be at some juncture, and I don't know where it will come from, but there will be talk about, and I don't know, it'll be very difficult to glean all the information because every district is done differently. And again, the feds have given these kind of middle-sized ability to say it can be used to, you know, for things that resulted because of COVID. Well, that's a lot. That can be a lot of things. I mean, and I'm put it this way: I know districts have used all of that money because of COVID. It's just that it's going to look different in every district. And again, trying to get a universal definition to say, well, we're going to start using the CARES Act or FAIRS Act to try to determine what we're going to do from a formula standpoint at state level. It's kind of a really iffy proposition to me. So, but again, I'm just saying, be prepared to, at some juncture, someone's going to ask you, well, how'd you spend your federal money? And so, and you know, it's interesting. This is the Senate district in the state. There's newly elected Patricia Mueller is also on the Education Funding and Education Policy Division, along with Representative Bennett. So this is one of the most well represented in terms of number of people or region, where if Peggy's busy, you can just go over and call Representative Mueller. So it's just interesting how, and again, we'll have to see how this all shakes out, but it's going to be very, and my only hope is that we, in these very challenging times, that we somehow find a way to kind of go back to the civics book, how a bill becomes a law, where you introduce a bill, the bills come in, there's two different bills, they negotiate them out in public, everybody sees where everybody's at. What we've had the last decade or so is that, you know, three people hole up, the governor and the two leaders, caucus leaders, hole up in the governor's mansion, come out, and here's your bill. And again, it's not a reflection on the governor or the leaders, it's just that the system has become so intractable. Getting to agreement has become so difficult, and it just makes the public just roll their eyes and say, how come you people can't, you know, make a decision? We've got to balance our checkbook at home. Can't you balance your checkbook as well? It's a little more complex than that, but I just think that it would be wonderful if in this more challenging time where they really narrow the scope of what they want to do and kind of do that all in a way where everybody has their input, but at the end of the day, the decision is made in a way that makes everybody feel at least heard. So.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? Any questions or thoughts? Well, I guess the puppy's going to have an opportunity to see you.
Yeah, wow.
Thanks so much for coming down.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's the first time I've been out in a while. I still am able to go to my office to work because I'm the only one in the basement at the MASA building, and so it's I ate everyone's potato chips before they went bad.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, 9.2, Dr. Funk, MSBA Leadership Conference Session 1 discussion.
Yeah, just, I know we're going to be talking again in another week, but did anybody have any takeaways that they really, you know, from the first session? I saw part of the keynote, and that's the only thing I really had a chance to take a look at. Or we can touch base on it now, or we can, you know, next week when we get together on the 28th.
I mean, if there's anyone that, like a takeaway or something special you'd like to say and maybe save the bulk of the discussion, that would be fine, whichever.
I would just, I know they recorded the session, so if there's one that you wanted to go to and you were at a different one, that would be good to do that. And if I would recommend, if you have an opportunity, the Lunch and Learn by the Commissioner of Education I thought was very good. So if you have a chance.
I had something urgent come up that morning, so I haven't seen the sessions yet, but I'll be looking for the recordings.
Just a general comment for what it's worth, I think this might be another example of where we perhaps have learned something as a result of this pandemic, and there are certain aspects of this convention that are more convenient, more things accessible. You can address things online, click on this, click on that, and whereas when you're there personally, you don't get the brochures from various sessions. You'd get the ones that you're going to. So I hope that the powers that be learn something, as I think a lot of people have, as a result of this experience we've had in the last year.
Okay, anything else? Just, or we can, like I said, you'll have the bulk next week or on 28th, so. Okay, then we'll move on to 9.3, which is an action item, which we are provided the calendar, which we haven't done before, but I think that's good for our committee meeting schedule.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of an update to it. We didn't have all the curriculum dates on the one that went out with the packet, so they're all on there now as well. So we got together as an admin team and we talked through this and we figured, you know what, let's put some dates for the board members out on the calendar so that they can schedule it out during the year. And so these are our recommendations for those meetings.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept. Is there a second? Second by Jill. Okay, any discussion on the dates?
I think this would be helpful to have these dates set out ahead of time. Thank you.
Angie?
The dates, but I didn't know if we needed to talk about being added to the curriculum committee?
Yes, you're there.
So, yeah, Angie contacted us after the meeting and she said, I think, Neil, you're on the curriculum committee, and she thought, hey, I'd be interested in that as well. So, yeah, certainly, I mean, the board could adopt and make a motion to have her on the committee, or you can certainly show up at a committee meeting because there's only two board members there, so that's not a problem. So,
Kim, would you like to amend your motion just to add Angie to the curriculum committee so we make it official?
Absolutely, I'll amend my motion.
Okay. And Jill, is that fine for a second?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, the same sign. Passes 7-0. And 9.4, discussion new board member orientation. Dr. Funk.
So, as Brad was talking tonight, I was thinking, I heard him talking cross-subsidy, he's talking about the formula, a lot of stuff that newer board members probably are not real aware of. And so, so I'm glad this is on the agenda tonight so we can really talk about in the equity piece and how we have a lower tax capacity here in Albert Lea, so our taxpayers pay more because we don't have as much industry. So a suggestion is that we do it on the afternoon of the 28th. If Angie and Bruce, you're the first two who would be, you're the target audience. And then the other question I would have is, are there other board members who are interested in this as kind of a refresher that we could, that's why I want to talk about it as a whole board, so that we can post for it as a meeting or a continuation of the meeting, if the 28th works. Okay, and so if, yeah, we'd have lunch and then we would do it in the afternoon. Anybody else, or just those two, or?
I'll be out of town, but good idea.
I might be interested in attending. I'm trying to find that date right here.
It's Thursday the 28th.
Yeah, I think it would work for me, and I might be interested.
Okay.
I'm not available.
All right. Okay. So, Okay. Well, since there's 4 of you who potentially are interested, I'll have her post for a special meeting for that afternoon, and we can do that.
Good. All right. Okay, well, that brings us to number 10. Thank you for coming tonight, and meeting will be adjourned.